All right, everybody. Hello, and welcome to episode 142, 143. I'm the worst host in the world of Conservatish. My name is Peter Feliciano, and I'm your host. You can find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano. You can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/conservatish or on Venmo at Peter-Feliciano if you just want to shoot me over that. You can also send complaints or titty pics to conservatishpodcast@gmail.com. Yeah, I'm happy to debate you, or even sometimes even have you on the show if you're willing to. Our guest today is His Pioneers. Yay! Thank you so much for coming. Where can people find you and your music?
Right now on Bandcamp at hispioneers.bandcamp.com. and Instagram and Facebook as his.pioneers and His Pioneers, respectively.
Nice. Good stuff. And you are, I know you said yesterday that I'm somewhat, was it you? It might have been someone else. Someone called me an anomaly. I think it might have, yeah. I was like, well, you're a bit of an anomaly as well. A black kid doing country music. It's not something, or at least in the public eye, and I only know a very small amount of country. But when did you start playing country music? When did you get interested in country music?
I'd like to think it's been a pretty lifelong thing. My dad is a truck driver, and I spent a lot of my childhood in the cab of an 18-wheeler, listening to country music on a CB radio.
Wow.
But also, I guess my mom loves soft rock and my dad loves a lot of roots reggae. And if you look at the etymology of country music from the mid-60s into the mid-70s, you find that there are multiple moments of interloping with soft rock and reggae respect. So the sort of fundamental sounds of country I always really resonated with. But then during the Obama administration, I started to see a new culture war emerging. And I saw the ways that the white working class was being alienated. And I became more and more interested in ways for me to contextualize my black struggle with their rural, poor white struggle. Not to compare the two, but just to say that historically speaking, we need them and they need us. And so country music is part of my larger attempt to reconcile, I guess, those worlds.
Would you say that that's your main goal, is not reconciling worlds maybe, but like for me as an example, I think, if I really sat down and obviously sometimes it looks like race jokes or, sex jokes or all kinds of foul stuff. But ultimately my main drum is to connect us and help us laugh and help us, humanize each other. Mm-hmm. What do you feel like is your main purpose? Because you were saying that you wanted to bring those two worlds, and so that maybe the not juxtaposition, but the way they coalesce. So what do you feel like is your main purpose in all art, maybe?
Personally, I, whilst I've been interested in stand-up for a long time, I think stand-up is a really cool medium and stuff like that. And it's a very humanizing medium, as music can be, but I have absolutely no interest personally in bringing people together or humanizing. I'm very much...
I like that.
Okay, it's a cool thing. It's an important thing, but it's only one of the pieces. And that's not my concern. I guess I would say humanizing to a large degree, in the sense that I think we should even humanize Nazis, not because humanizing should be a means of legitimizing someone's experience. Only God can do that. But humanizing someone is a way to maybe build a coalition that you didn't think was there. If it turns out it wasn't there, then heck it, move on to the next one. But I think that at certain tactical times, that humanizing is a really important, thing.
Tool. Yeah.
Tool, maybe. Exactly. Yeah. Utilitarian sort of approach. Right. And what concerns me... sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead. Finish yours.
Well, as I've listened to your episodes, and I've been really excited to have this conversation with you. One thing
Sure.
that I was hoping to work through with you, because I think we have a lot of overlap on stuff, but like, I wonder to what degree the Trump coalition, frankly, has less love for the white working class than I do. You know, I think in a lot of ways, when we look at middle America, blue collar America, it's a people who have been similar to like blacks in the Democratic Party. Look at Joe Biden's recent comments, right?
Right.
If you don't support me, you ain't black. There's this taking advantage. There's this. Both groups are being taken advantage of. And
Okay.
while in someone like Andrew Breitbart, whose politics I disagree with, but I think Andrew Breitbart is an honest actor who does actually care about the white working class. I think he's also somewhat of a racist and ethno nationalist, and that's not okay. But
Sure. I
his
haven't done
intent,
any research into him. I know he passed away a few years ago, but
yeah, he's an absolute genius, incredibly important thinker. And I know you're a Ben Shapiro person. I would say Ben Shapiro is the KV Toys to Andrew Breitbart's Toys R Us, in the sense that Andrew
okay.
Breitbart was the first person on the right to really theorize the repolitization of a culture war. So with Reagan, you had for the first time the right wing of the Republican Party, or the right wing of the country, reaching out to evangelicals. Beforehand, evangelicals just didn't vote. From 1770, well, evangelicals weren't here in 1776, but from the Mormons in the 1840s up until 1979, evangelicals had no impact on national politics.
Wow.
They
Okay.
were essentially like the Amish, they were very enclosed. Ronald Reagan then started a culture war, or rather accelerated a culture war that had been going on that Carter kind of suppressed. So Reagan deliberately connects big business to the evangelicals. And that's the moment where you see the white working class being left out. Because you had some white working class who were Democrats, but then they came back home, got spit on, and called baby killers. And then they were just kind of like, fuck the whole McGovern coalition and the remnants of the Democratic Party. Then you, well, that's pretty much actually their experience. So then you have, by 1982-ish, Ronald Reagan paying lip service to them with some tough on crime rhetoric while
Mm.
totally neglecting their economic needs. But they had enough in savings that they could afford to be racist and not really care, you know.
Okay. Now, from correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I heard, the 80s was also a big boon time for a lot of people. Are you saying that maybe it was only for the rich and it didn't trickle down?
No, the 80s was a boom time, but only because the United States macroeconomy was growing so much. Because at the turn of the 80s, you had all sorts of new computing technologies and victories in the Cold War that were opening up new prospective markets at the same time that there were increasingly complex algorithms developing for investment. So what you saw in the 1980s was a shift from the majority of GDP being industrial manufacture to being investment and finance. But
Okay.
that took a few decades until it really became an untenable disequilibrium. So during the 1980s, during the Reagan years, factories were being shipped overseas, but there were enough private prisons being built to make new union jobs for those people. But now we don't need coal. We don't
Right.
even, you know what I mean? So it's like,
Now, at the same time, I can understand. I do think that that's entirely possible. Um, I certainly am not a blanket, Trump person or anybody's, any politician, owns me or do I think that they are well intentioned. I think shysters come in all shapes and colors, and I think politicians are one of the best examples of those. Um, my I think it's entirely possible to assert what you said as far as disenfranchisement of them, of the white working class, while at the same time giving them lip service. Maybe he also, at the same time, besides helping the economy, helping the economy, he also feeds that need of theirs culturally more than emotionally, or more than economically, and that is an important need. That is an important
Absolutely.
need. So
Absolutely.
more than even, I would say, more than even being proactive about helping them, he's more, hey, at least I'm not saying you're a fucking racist. Hey, at least I'm not saying, at least I'm not, defunding. Hey, it's more of almost a reactionary. He's feeding
Defunding
that
what? The
cultural.
police?
Yes, he's saying, like, at least he's saying like, so maybe he's meeting that cultural need. And yes, I do think people's, obviously, I really don't know the numbers, but I do think he is meeting the economic need. But you're saying that that's not necessarily true.
That's most certainly not true, but also he has no control over that. And one thing that I really resent a lot of the left for, not just liberals, because liberals aren't the left, but even some of the most critical, insightful, theoretic minds tend to have cases of Trump derangement syndrome on the right. No president can affect the course of globalization, but the president can pay lip service to it. And that's where I have tremendous respect for President Trump, is because
God, that was hard to say, wasn't it?
yeah.
Don't worry, there's nuance here. You're all right.
I saw myself like disowning or getting disowned by Cavaclades.
I won't. When I make a clip about this show, I won't just say, "Here's this 3-second." Don't worry. All right, continue.
I appreciate that, but there is this very nefarious tendency with the Democratic Party to treat people like to want managers of the population. Hillary is qualified. Barack was editor of the Harvard Review or whatever, right? And
Okay.
it's like, what I like about President Trump is that there's none of that. And that's important because pedigree is white supremacy. When we talk about qualifications, when we talk about these very systematized ideas of knowledge, that is white supremacy. And that's not something I'm going to support either.
Right. Why do you think? Why is it white supremacy in your mind? Because of the legacy, or
in the sense that qualifying the ways in which we qualify knowledge automatically bring in a lot of classism and racism and fucked up shit. So when people attack Trump for being unqualified and discount the fact that he resonates with people, that's already some really elitist, fucked up shit that I look at.
Okay.
Because if he resonates with people, he has to be doing something right. And he has to be grounded in a certain way that many people are. And whilst I may vehemently disagree, we're a republic, and you can't just say, oh, they're racist. They voted for Obama at least once, but now they're racist. And
right. And that's one of the main problems that I had with Hillary. I mean, it was after the election that I started really digging into what do I actually believe, because I think that's a normal, natural thing for a 30-year-old, 29-year-old to do. But, or maybe people who are, I mean, not that I wasn't smart beforehand, but I didn't really care about politics. I just was like, oh, this is the right thing to do. So, I believed, like, the branding, you know what I mean? When I hear things like "Make America Great Again," yeah, I kind of, in a way, not necessarily scope or intention necessarily or whatever, I class it in the same way as Black Lives Matter. Branding is a wonderful thing. Okay, it's always been a wonderful thing for a long, long time. And if you can make something catchy, it doesn't matter what's actually happening. And I'm not saying that what's actually happening is nefarious or bad intentioned or even negative. But I am saying there's a difference between brand and action. And Black Lives Matter has picked a beautiful, beautiful brand. because of course you would want to make America great again. Who wouldn't want to? Of course, Black Lives Matter. They choose something to moniker themselves that, of course, you would want to. So, of course, those who are against Make America Great Again don't want to make America great again. Or, of course, those who are against the tactics or the whatever of Black Lives Matter don't think Black Lives Matter. It's like no. These are really complicated. I do want to ask you a clarifying question. Do you feel like, as far as the white supremacy angle, to the thing you were talking about earlier, do you feel like it is ill-intentioned? Do you feel like it is malicious or at least intentional?
I don't care.
Okay. I mean, again, to clarify just for myself, you're saying that until I need more coffee. You're saying that essentially, what was the thing you said about white supremacy? God damn it. Oh, the worst part.
It's like this. It's like this series of like litmus tests and ways of qualifying knowledge.
But how would it be white supremacy? I could understand maybe racism, classism for sure, but the example you brought up was the Trump is unqualified, but Trump isn't a white but Trump is white. So I'm wondering if someone would be using that, or maybe that's just an example that you're using to say it's more of a class thing or whatever, but I'm trying to just understand what you mean.
Okay. If I may back up a little bit, I think this might contextualize. Well,
okay.
Years ago in college, I realized that whenever someone would write Black American in an academic context, the B would be capitalized. But with white America, the W would be lowercase, because there was this assumption that white is somehow this static and visual signifier, as opposed to a social wink and nod that has nothing to do with ethnicity. Think about a Sephardic Jew versus an Irishman versus an Australian versus a Boer. Whiteness is always changing and moving.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about white supremacy, I don't so much think of it as racist people being racist as I do what is this metastasizing virus? And white supremacy requires people who aren't white to participate. It requires amoral economies. White supremacy, I see it as a system, which by definition means everything in between the individual players, right? The atom is 95% empty space. White supremacy is predominantly not people. Racist people have nothing to do with white supremacy. And that's another thing that frustrates me about the left's critique of the MAGA crowd. So what if they're Confederate apologists? So what if they're racists? It took a racist Texan to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1965. It took a black president to bring slavery back to Libya, back to Africa, Obama. Someone's personal intentions have nothing to do with where they sit and how they can be leveraged.
So you're not necessarily saying it's conscious nor malicious. You're saying that it's like, as an example, that thing you're talking about as far as the Black Americans versus white Americans. The way I see it, or the thing that brought up in my head when you were talking about that, is the idea that white people need to flagellate themselves because they really think they're so awesome. They have to bring themselves down they need to bring the black man up to their level, but the black man doesn't need to be brought up to their level.
Right.
There's a subconscious, I need to protect this poor black person who can't fend for themselves, when the black person is like, no, they can. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
No, you're right. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. I don't know. I guess I can get behind that. Do you feel like it's malicious or conscious necessarily? With the let's say with the powers that be, not with the individuals.
I feel like every person is walking with a God hole size in their heart or a well of insecurity in their stomach, wherever you want to place that. But just there's dread somewhere in the center chakra. And white supremacy gives a bunch of feckless losers who happen to be born the right way the opportunity to release a little bit of that.
Okay.
Now, if it weren't
Yeah.
for white supremacy, maybe it would be gender discrimination. Maybe it would be soccer hooliganism.
Mm-hmm. That's where I think. Did you listen to the Alex episode or the Nico episode? The ones a few weeks ago.
Yeah, the
That's
Nico one. Yeah.
This is the message. This is the message that I keep trying to put out there. Sometimes heavy-handedly. Sometimes nuanced. But is that humanity is the problem? You know what I mean? We can't get away from, and we can do our best, and we've gotten better to use society to pull back this angry, dark, filthy, weird, awkward nature that is in every single one of us. Okay, but it will rear its ugly head. It will find a way. Life finds a way, and so I don't personally care whether. I don't think a hate crime is worse than a crime. Personally, I don't think that let's use Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd. I don't think that is worse than the Mexican mother who beheaded her 5-year-old daughter.
You really don't?
I don't think.
Okay.
I really don't think that's worse. I think a lost life is a lost life. Let's try to fix it. But Derek Chauvin would have, even if he wasn't racist, he would have found a way. If he felt insecure enough and powerless enough and angry enough and was abused enough and was all the right perfect storm of fuckery was enough to bring him to be an abusive cunt, he's gonna be an abusive cunt. I say it all the time. Karens come in all colors, okay? Work a Cheesecake Factory for more than 5 minutes and you'll find that out. People who are powerless or insecure, people who are afraid, anxiety, that dirty, dark animal inside of each and every one of us will find a way to try to get power, to get security, and fill that hole, like you're saying.
Yes. And I would say that's actually a very, so I'm glad we're both holding hands in Christ's image. That's a very Christian thing of you to say, this notion of original sin. And it sounds like from how the conversation we're having ends, like what I've heard from you in the past.
I just think about it in that way. I just thought about it like even from an evolutionary angle. Okay. I actually didn't know you were a Christian.
Yeah, I have. It's an interesting and evolving relationship because I didn't go to church growing up, and my parents have their spiritual lives, but I was never brought up with religion. But then I started doing some Bible study just out of personal interest, and while I think Christianity is a religion, so it's intrinsically kind of messed up.
Right.
I think that what makes Christianity unique is that Jesus, as a figure, was existing in the Roman Empire. He, as a man, was struggling to understand how to balance his relationship with the state versus with God. And as an American, that's something I feel is a worthwhile mental exercise.
Okay. Would you even maybe call it society versus nature? Like,
no,
you know what I'm saying?
I wouldn't at all. Not at all. Not
okay.
at all.
Okay.
Because society existed before civilization, and the state is a very specific form of civilization. So to necessarily attribute the unique power relationships of the state to any kind of inherent societal trait that you would see in Homo sapiens sapiens hanging out, I think is a really dangerous misdirection.
Okay, and do you think that maybe it subconsciously adds more power to the state when there shouldn't be there?
No, I do think that happens. That definitely happens.
Okay.
But sort of going back to the point I mentioned, where in the 1980s, remember when I said the economies kind of flipped? So GDP went from being predominantly industrial to investment. And that money that was accrued represents real power. So when we look at the ways that the US government has grown and multinational corporations have grown, and the way that those people relate to white America is where I then say, no, Derek Chauvin is not the same as the Mexican mother beheading that child, because Derek Chauvin was paid by taxpayers. He had a pension. He was entrusted with a certain
Sure.
responsibility.
Right. And I'm not saying that it is the same. I'm saying
Okay.
the animus is the same. I'm saying the animus is the same. I'm saying that Mexican mother obviously had mental problems. Okay.
Yeah, I know nothing of the story. Could you remind me and the listeners about this?
Yeah. From what it sounded like, she stabbed her daughter to death and then beheaded her. She called the cops and said that the reason why she did it is because her daughter was asking for cereal too much. Now, even if I personally believe that even if, as far as the animus goes, that even if her daughter had stolen money,
Oh no! Wait. Okay, I
somewhere
thought that was like a
along the
George Floyd
line,
joke.
I know, right? You're on the right show. You can do it. I've
Cool.
seen some memes, motherfucker. Holy shit. The underground meme world has been on fire since George Floyd died. Now,
Well, he didn't die. He didn't die. He was killed since George Floyd was killed.
okay, sure, absolutely. I'm not, Now, what I'm saying is not conflating those two people. What I'm saying is the animus involved. I'm saying the desire to kill, the mental. Just because Derek Chauvin wasn't talking to himself doesn't mean that he's not mentally fucking ill. I think fear and anxiety are incredibly powerful. Okay, and I think that I look at myself and my life, and the people who I know who are walking a spiritual walk in some way or another, and Buddhists and whatever, all kinds of people, and even atheists who know themselves will know that when they look inside themselves, they can see that they do have a murderous, like if they really if they really pay attention, they've had murderous thoughts. Okay, and I'm not saying it's the same, but I'm saying if left unchecked and put, it's a pressure cooker. Incels,
Right.
as an example,
not to cut you off, I'm so sorry, but can I just, because yeah, great. So I definitely think that I would say two things. One, that instinct, that proclivity towards violence, mayhem, chaos, like that black pilling part of our soul, whatever you want to call it, that's definitely there for everybody. Again, I don't think that's bad, though. I'm not someone who's here to bring people together. You need builders and you need destroyers. They work in tandem with one another, right? You moisturize and then you shed scar tissue. The other thing I wanted to say, however, is in the context of that, I would invoke two sources. One writer, Frantz Fanon, who was a psychologist working in post-colonial pathologies. And I would also invoke the Stanford prison experiments, which were done in the early 70s. And these were two psychologists who were grappling with the ways that authority brings out deeper mental illnesses. Absolutely. So there are two layers to this cake. So yeah, you've got a lot of people who are being assholes like Derek Chauvin, but most of those people would get punched out by minute 4, or the cops would be called on them by minute 7.
Okay. Yes.
So what I'm interested in is, with those people, that's one thing. But what I'm concerned about is, and why I personally am a huge proponent of defunding police departments, is that this next level of the cake is the one thing we can control. I don't want to police people's language. I don't want to police their Facebooks. And we're just going to have to live with the fact that, you know what? Some people are going to shoot up schools, but we still have a Second Amendment. So let's stop trying to stop people from doing the bad shit and instead figure out how we can collectively make a better system appear.
Okay. Okay. But what we're looking at in that realm is which would be worse. I agree with what you're saying. So do you understand what I mean, though, when I was conflating those two, the animus? between the mother who killed her daughter and the cop. I'm saying I'm totally on board with power
Absolutely.
corrupts. Absolutely, power corrupts. Okay.
Well, not so much power corrupts, though. I'm sorry, Peter. Not so much power corrupts as that, like, power adds carbon, right? Like, it doesn't change the thing; it just gives it some juice. So I'm saying, and where I would maybe think that Chauvin and the mom are different is that I think that mother, from what little I'm hearing, hated that child. Tragic as that is to say, we see things like postpartum depression, where
Sure.
women go through there's really complex stuff there. I think Chauvin. Well, yeah, that was hate. Yeah, you're right. I'll back it up. I thought about it. I see you. Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. When it came to that other example I brought up, where in the Family Dollar store, do you remember that example? So the Family Dollar store, black security guard, black mother, and her son. The son's not wearing a mask. The black security guard says, hey, he needs to wear a mask. They start to get in a verbal altercation. He says, you know what? Don't help this lady. He says to the cashier, don't help this lady until she puts her son, a mask on her son. The son goes to the car. They start yelling at each other. She comes back 20 minutes later, and another son with her other son and with her husband, and they start yelling at the security guard, blah, blah, blah. Black security guard turns his head, and her black son shoots him in the back of the head. Okay. I'm saying life, disgusting, dark, dirty, frightened little animals will find a way. Okay. It's going to come out one way or another. Now, I am not saying that there aren't different consequences for each of those. Okay. Because I am not saying, because that guy was, it does seem like from what I've read from the, not enough, I assume, but it does seem that there are sometimes immunity for police that there shouldn't be. Okay.
Certainly.
But I am saying the animus. I'm saying understanding that racism. Oh, we need to quell racism. Okay, what about the millions of black people who are killing black people every year at incredible numbers? We don't need to do anything about that because it's black on black. I'm saying let's deal with the disease, not the symptom. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I've heard. I'd like to discuss the black on black talking point with you a lot because, or rather, I'd like to discuss with you because I've heard it mentioned a lot. And I understand it, but I'm very dubious of the motivation behind it. Because to me, what it sounds like is saying that black people have to live, they live efficient lives. As opposed to, and like sort of like it sort of uses the language of public health in a way that necessarily turns people into cells on a petri dish. It's not about the fact that in general X many black people die. It's about the individual vulgarity of a tax-paying black American being murdered by the gun that he paid for. It's similar to why I oppose the Vietnam War, but sometimes, and I've been having these thoughts a lot, I'll come close to the point of tears when I'll think about a veteran coming home and getting called a baby killer. That breaks me in a way that few other things do.
Did you have family who went to Vietnam?
No, not at all.
No. Okay, you don't have any veterans in your family?
No. No. My cousin did serve in Afghanistan for a while.
Okay, but it wasn't necessarily directly connected to that.
No, but I liked 60s music growing up. Well, actually, if I may sort of just go on this tangent.
Please.
I came of age directly post 9/11. And in 4th grade, we invaded Iraq. And one of my classmates' uncles lost a leg in that war and was featured in Newsday on the Newsday newspaper. I was going to say magazine, but it's not a magazine. And he was so proud and so unquestioning of the war. And
so what of the war? I'm sorry?
Proud and unquestioning.
Okay.
Unquestioning. And at the same time, taking truck trips with my dad, listening to country music, I was also listening to a lot of political talk radio. And whether it was Rush Limbaugh or Air America 1600, I was hearing talk of this anti-war left that was emerging. And the older I got, the more I got into like 5th grade and 6th grade, and I saw that cool kids were like drinking beer or whatever, you know, the more I learned about what cool meant, the more I saw, oh, the fucking 60s were cool, and the anti-war movement isn't cool now. And I think that variable of cool is, again, like that's why MAGA is so powerful and legitimate. That's why Andrew Breitbart is so righteous and legitimate, racist as they might be. That's even why in the 1920s the Ku Klux Klan started a mail order catalog and sold more than 2 million robes across the country, priced between $150 to $500 in a mail order catalog. You need to make your shit cool. Fuck what the shit is, fundamentally. And there's a real sense of self-satisfaction on the left that is also racist, because it's this assumption that I've transcended myself. As you were saying, white guilt is this idea that I need to bring myself down. Nah, just shut the fuck up. In fact, don't even worry about picking someone up. You don't even need to do that. Just stop. That's all you need to do.
I do like that. Yeah, I do like that. It's not just the soft bigotry of low expectations. It's the soft bigotry of, and I keep saying it, but I think a lot of the white women I know, a lot of the white liberal women I know God, I'm trying, because you're very well spoken. This is a very intellectual conversation. But again, I have to come in a little heavy-handed with a dildo and just say sometimes these white liberal bitches are not having sex. That's the reason why they're just that. I'm hungry for a child, okay? Not just sex, not just letting the energy out or the air out or letting that animal breathe or that animal play or whatever you want to fucking call it. But they also feel this gaping hole in their belly because they have not had a relationship enough to have a child that makes them go, oh my God, I need to mother some motherfucker. Oh, and now I see somebody from a black person that I follow on Instagram. Black people need mothering. They'll be my children. Oh, and I'll get a black boyfriend, so I'll get even more status, and it'll just status. It's the dishonesty that bothers me more than anything. And it's not the dishonesty in that's malicious or intentional. It's the self-dishonesty that bothers me, you know?
Oh, I think I'm getting a news flash. Luckily for you, most people, even vaguely center of left, have their gripes with white feminine liberalism. And so I would just hope that that crowd doesn't become the cross on which a lot of the center left dies for you and for a lot of other people who are center right. Right. Because I think those people are uniquely repulsive.
Right. God, what a great word. I also think, though, that part of the reason why I get so passionate is not just to be, because this is where I personally believe I think you've heard enough of my dumb shit to know, like, I'm not flippantly, I don't flippantly say things. Huh?
You said the dumb shit. I said, I've heard the good shit too.
It's all good. Patreon.com/conservatish. But I think you would know, like, I don't use as an example the saying of the statistics flippantly. I'm not trying to show that liberals are wrong just in order to get my jollies. And I certainly, even though it's been bantied about a little bit within some of my friends who decide to share with me their opinions about what I do in spite of me not asking, have told me that I'm being or they come from a place of thinking that I'm being, what's the word for Milo Yiannopoulos when he was provocateur? That I think I'm being I'm just contradictory because I'm for contradictory's sake. That is not what I'm goddamn doing. The reason why I get so passionate is because I know these people who are posting dumb fucking liberal shit. I know them, and I know that they're humans just like me, and I know that they're holding up blocks in between them and themselves. They're holding up blocks in between them and somebody else. They're holding up blocks. They're getting to the point where you can't even wear a fucking hat in public with like, depending on the fucking hat. Like you can't. I've had a shirt on that said, I made it myself. It said, it's okay if we disagree on politics. And I've worn that everywhere. And every type of person, even the most liberal motherfuckers that I know, have said, yeah, legit. Okay. And yet on Facebook, they're going to post about how you better listen. Shut up, white people. You're fucking separating yourself from truth. You're separating yourself from each other. It's maddening because we should be, I don't think I'm exactly for the same reasons, but remember Bill Hicks?
Of course. Rest in peace.
And Bill Hicks was like, we should be going to fucking space. We shouldn't be bothering ourselves with these petty little arguments. You know what I mean? Our next thumb needs to grow, motherfucker. It's evolution time, and you guys are bogging us down with don't hurt people's feelings. Suck a dick, man. God.
Well, to paraphrase what you just said about Bill Hicks said we shouldn't concern ourselves, not we need to win this argument.
Yes.
Some people are just spiritually lost, and they need to build a relationship with their ancestors and their God. And they instead use political tokens to do that because they see politics and they think power. No, power lies in yourself and in your God. But if you don't know who your God is or what yourself is, then you see the president and think, oh, that's what power is. So you have a bunch of people with empty souls going into that realm.
Right. And it is not just as maybe. I think it does manifest it on the right itself. I follow a lot of conservatives who sometimes will post stuff that I know that they're trying to get the ire up of the leftists that don't even follow them anymore because they've unfriended each other. Mm-hmm. I've seen that happen. But the reason I guess that it doesn't bother me so much when it comes from the right is because culturally, as far as where the fucking Hollywood or wherever, they don't like rightist people conservative people don't really have the culture power right now, like from what I see. Yes. Mm-hmm. I just looked at the Trump rally in Topeka going on right now, and by the way, there were a shit ton of black people. But anyway,
so what? Like what's what I mean?
I'm saying that to those cunts. I'm saying it to the white cunts who are like, oh, we should only listen to black voices. You only know 3 black voices.
But what that means is you're taking those black Trump supporters who might be well-reasoned conservatives and flattening their identity back into race to throw at the liberals.
In order to say that identity politics is not the fucking way.
But why?
In order
you don't need
holes in it.
But why have the conversation on those terms even? Because again, that means
because they think they are righteous. And I need to put it right in their face, a little mirror that says, no. Now what are you going to say? The same thing that I talked about it when I shared Trayvon Martin's mom and how she said she didn't agree with defunding the police. I didn't let this long. I shortened it. I just said there's a quote from The Guardian. Now, regardless of the content, I then saw white people who wanted to. If it hadn't been Trayvon fucking Martin's mom, they would have said racist, just all the horrible shit. The reason why I'm sticking out like a sore thumb is because their white guilt overrides and so it breaks down the bullshit and it drops right to the ground. Now we can maybe discuss the idea over identity every fucking time. Idea over identity. Otherwise, that is actual fucking racism. Okay, and then now all of a sudden there's this movie coming out called Black Tom or Uncle Tom. Have you heard of it?
No.
Larry Elder made it. It's about black conservatives and how they get called Uncle Tom all the time, and how they get called coon, and how they get derided and completely thrown out from the black liberals. It's a black conservative movie. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of take what you want, leave the rest, blah blah blah. But I like that happening because as soon as I can shake these white motherfuckers who don't really even know any black people, and make them just kind of calm down a little bit and take the idea as itself, that helps them think. I have gotten through to some people through doing that. It's just a slow process. And like you said, The power is here. Okay, the truth, the reality is right here and right now. It doesn't exist fucking anywhere else. Okay, no matter how much I get spun and try to have imaginary conversations that don't exist with people who are online, who are on, they're eating dinner right now, and yet I'm like up on my roof smoking a cigarette, like, yeah, and then I'm gonna say this, no matter how many times that happened,
Yeah.
right here is all that matters, and so that's where it is. That's where the power is,
Totally.
Yeah. Anyway, continue. Or I don't even know who was going to say what next, but that's why I use identity politics, to hopefully shake them out of the fucking identity politics.
No, I appreciate your going through that, and I definitely agree. In terms of, well, what, not agree isn't the word. I'd like to credit you for those conversations that you're having with people whose minds are opening, because as you started to talk, after I just said, like, why are you having the conversation on those terms? Then I started to think, like, about Milo. Now, I think Milo actually said a lot of good shit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't particularly like his persona, but, like, he's not the dumbest person, and I guess what I'm saying is that, like, you got to have good ideas in all corners of the internet. When you've got NBC Universal with a $2.7 billion budget this quarter, able to saturate every airwave, every taxi cab, every billboard, it's really important that every possible opportunity to have that conversation is had. And so you're doing that. And I shouldn't have questioned as much.
No, what do you mean you shouldn't? Of course you say no. I'm never above being questioned. I should absolutely be questioned, because I'm often wrong. I am violently human. Now, you were talking about something that I felt like I wanted to get back to as well. The disenfranchisement. Do you feel like it is malicious on Trump's part?
I do.
Okay.
I do, and that's why I considered voting for him the first time. I'm very, very likely not going to vote for him this time around. At the same time, the Democratic Party is in shambles. They are openly inviting Bush-era neoconservatives. And if Trump decides to become a conservationist, then I could maybe support some kind of nationalist, semi-wing conservationist like platform over the neoliberal, or rather neoconservative globalism of the DNC. That is to say, I really don't like Trump. Probably not going to vote for him, but who knows? But yeah, I think he's very consciously dismissive of poor white people.
Okay. Do you think that a piece of that could be, because, when I see Judge Joe Brown, as an example, talk about Trump and how he was friends with the guy, and, he likes him and whatever. He says that Trump is what did he say? What was the exact quote? Was something to the effect of that Trump is the type of person who likes people who are good at what they do. He doesn't care if they're black or gay or straight or whatever. It doesn't matter. He likes, like, people who are like assassins at their job, and I can see that. I do think that Trump is childish in many ways. I do think that he is myopic when it comes to things like that, and the economy. I do think that he is like every politician. His job is mostly to get elected again, and so that's going to be a blind eye to liabilities, as far as, not necessarily things that he will do, but as far as the public eye and what he says at rallies and what he says on the news. But I don't think, or what, that was the question. Do you think that part of that maybe is not so much malicious, maybe conscious of it, but maybe trying to help them pull themselves up by their bootstraps, so that, or at least get more money so that he gets more votes, even if it's just for getting more votes? It's not Um, there's levels to maliciousness, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think it's necessarily the puppet strings drinking baby blood, like I've heard a lot of people say about the leftists or whatever. Like, I think it's money is the thing, maybe.
I don't get that impression because I, like our president, our most esteemed 46. Is he 40? Is he the 46th?
45.
45?
Mm-hmm.
Our most esteemed is from Eastern Queens, Assamai. And I'm pretty well acquainted with his childhood stomping grounds of Jamaica estates, namely the history of real estate development. And when you look at the development of real estate in New York City from 1930 to 1980, looking at Manhattan and Queens, Donald Trump is consistently on the wrong side of the good guy, bad guy developer divide going back. So what I'm saying is the reason, despite my affinity for the MAGA brand, I like Coca-Cola, not because it tastes good, but because like it's a cool can. It's cool. And like MAGA sounds good. The policies aren't that terrible where they're at their worst. Like I think our camps at the border are terrible. And I hold Donald Trump and President Obama equally responsible for what is more than a soft genocide happening in internment camps in the United States of America. Same with our prisons. Like, we have killing fields. We just put them behind barbed wire and give them federal contracts. But, like, we do have concentrated places for massive humanity to wallow in their filth and desiccate from the result. Like, we're not killing people. Okay. So what I'm saying is with Trump, the social circles he's shown to inhabit, from a young man in Queens to a more substantive developer in Manhattan, show him to be too conveniently close to very violently racist and classist policies over and over again. So much so that, like, I wouldn't call Trump a racist. Like, I think he's, like, might have racial problems, but, like, I don't think he is weird about black people because he dislikes black people. I think he's weird about black people because he's a spaz who's weird about anybody he doesn't really know. And he just so happens to mainly know not black people.
I also think I will add to that more. See, there's a difference between what's that dumb fucking phrase that again, my brain is just not firing at all. But causation and correlation. Like I think a black person comes to Trump's offices and just like applies, or Trump's company, and gets, I think Trump is weird around poor people too. I think he takes advantage, maybe. Okay, yeah. Takes advantage, sure, but just because a disproportionate amount, and I don't know this for sure, but from what I've some of the articles, that a disproportionate amount of black people at that time, or poor people were black at that time, or black people were poor at that time. I think it could be more classist. You know what I mean? I think it could be more. Now, the way to fix it could be racial in nature to the solution.
I would flip those.
They've already come to the table as poor, so it doesn't matter what color they are. You know what I mean?
I would flip those. I would say actually, because what you have with real estate development, a lot of big projects. I'll speak specifically to Donald Trump. I won't keep beating around the bush. What we saw from the period I laid out was cooperation between private developers, state government, and federal government, and international developers, right? So you have these different scales of investment and development happening. The one thing that bound them was race. Because
they were, or who they didn't approve.
The latter, who they didn't approve.
Okay.
So that's how you consolidate the cultural, the political, and the economic systems. That's how you make a white person who's been making $14 an hour for the past 3 years without a raise feel like they're not in public housing, even though they might live in the same square footage. So I think the problem, in terms of how we built our cities at least, and why I, again, support defunding the police, is that it's firmly structural. And the thing that tied, it was the dried jizz that has crusted all of our institutions.
I
It's this
love
notion
my
of
show.
race.
The dry jizz. Hang on. Repeat yourself.
The dry jizz that has encrusted our systems, economic, political, and cultural. I'm not saying go to church, but go to church. Is race, not class. Maybe we can untie them through class, maybe, but I think race is such a deep ideological project that actually the framework of racial identity is something that hits in an important way, because there are rich black people and poor white people. But if you're black, you could have been here from 1780 and you're still likely to be poor than some Greek family that got here 60 years ago. We especially see that disparity when coming to African immigrant communities, things like that.
Okay, now here's the question though.
Yeah.
How much of that, where along the line, and I was on Thomas Hura's show and I talked about this, where along the line does personal responsibility come in and culture as the influence, not race? So here's an example.
Sure.
In being that, like I said, that thing about the 53% of black people are, or the arrests for murder are 53% black people, and yet they're 13% of the population. I do not think it's because they're black and they're dumb and they're no. I think culture is what defines us. Like you're saying, when there's a group of motherfuckers who are going to church and they're legit, you know what I mean? Yes, they're gonna have a cousin who goes to jail or whatever, but they're also gonna have. I mean, if you talk to any, maybe not you because you didn't grow up in the church. You go to Georgia, find any black guy, even if he's like big swinging dick, like I'm amazing, and you mention, or you can easily make him feel like, you know how their Catholics have guilt, Jews have guilt, everybody's guilt. You can easily make him feeling, are you backsliding right now? Oh man, he's just gonna have this. He's gonna have this fucking this voice in his head about his mom or his grandma who told him that, you know, he remembers his preacher. I mean, Kanye long before, I mean, talked about it all the time on even his first record, getting baptized like 3 or 4 fucking times, right? That's legit. So culture is what influences us, right? What we're taught influences us. So I think that's what that 53% is, and I think that at least it's not white man keeping the thumb down on black people. I think a lot of it is, I learned as a black man growing up that I'm a victim, and I learned to hustle a certain way, not to hustle at McDonald's, or not to hustle at the Kohl's, or not to hustle and learn how to sell, okay, at the fucking, you know, at the cell phone store. I learned how to hustle on the street, so I'm going to emulate that for my children, whether they like it or not, whether I like it or not. And so it's gonna repeat the cycle over and over. I think culture is what does it, not race. You know what I mean? So I think that goes to that idea of why a black lineage, if you will, might be more poor. Number one, that branches out thousands and thousands and thousands of ways. Somewhere along those lines, or maybe hundreds, somewhere along that, somebody's going to be rich, okay? And somebody's going to be rich for 100 years and then not. And somebody's going to be, I mean, there's a lot of people that I know who, you know, didn't have shit, you know what I mean? Who came from, you know, Germany in the fucking 1890s, you know what I mean? And yet built themselves up into being, resourceful and culturally broke their fucking ass, you know what I mean? And worked 12, 13, 14-hour days. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Very much so. And since we're talking about the German people, I'd like to say something verboten, if I may. This is not something that a lot of my fellow left-wingers like to think about, but like, yeah, I do think it's largely cultural, not because I don't think I do think there's been a 500-year conspiracy against dark-skinned people in the Americas. And it's not just the United States. Not everyone thinks that. You don't need to think that. But at the end of the day, as we can transcend our corporeal lives by submitting ourselves to a higher spiritual code. So if a man can achieve immortality through meditation, a black person can achieve the middle class through actually not cutting school, to a point. However, I also think, as an American citizen, you're allowed to be a fuck up and you should still be guaranteed bullshit. I don't care if you are...
Bullshit? What do you mean bullshit? Resources, or do you mean... What do you mean?
Could you remind me of the sentence I said? Because I remember...
Yeah, as an American, you should be able to fuck up and still get bullshit, or still receive bullshit.
Yeah, sorry. Still receive, like, stuff, like benefits and whatnot.
Okay.
During the Charleston Unite the Right rally, I heard so many people on the left going, oh man, this is what happens when the ACLU defends Nazis in court. No, you have to protect the right of Nazis to march. At the same time, you have a right to have a few friends who are willing to do 20 years. You have the right to also get a weapon. What I'm saying is, I don't advocate violence, but the logic of shutting down, like, I think once you're an American citizen, in the case of race, once you're an American citizen, you're entitled to shit. I guess what I'm trying to articulate is the logic of entitlement.
Okay. Now,
why shouldn't black people be entitled to, like, do the same bullshit, make the same bad investments that some white person does without going bankrupt for 2 generations?
You don't think they are?
No.
And why would a bankruptness last 2 generations?
That becomes a class thing.
I think I disagree with you on that point, because there's a lot of people who, that's where it comes down to that idea of where along the line does personal responsibility come in. I'm not saying that you're blanket saying black people should get away with, or reparations or any of that stuff, but somewhere along the line with a lot of leftist minds, they don't quantify, tell me on fucking paper where personal responsibility comes in, because there are black people who grew up in shit, okay, who had family die, blah, 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 and yet they're doing well for themselves.
I'll ask you this.
Right?
Where do you see the applicability of, and like I'm genuinely asking, right? You said, like,
sure,
find it on paper. Where do you see that translating into the public policy goal? Like, in terms, because it sounds like a moral company.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if I see it, or if I have any specifically thought out versions of public policy. I think the biggest way to help instill that idea is culturally, okay, is church, like you were saying, which, white people have been trying to destroy for a long fucking time, or at least in music and music and art and on the coasts. But as far as where personal responsibility plays in, is you get the opportunity to go to school, right? So I'm not saying necessarily. No, I'm not saying
to almost rephrase it, maybe in the negative, right? So, because I'm very willing to accept the premise that a lot of Black American culture is just broken, right? I'm not saying I believe that, but I'd accept that premise, right? Whether you want to call it whatever. It's like on a straight, like, very conservative, like, I'm Ben Shapiro right now, and, like, I'm saying what I'm saying about, like, you know how he feels. Remember when he was all like, I listen to some hip hop and, it's nothing compared to Bach, whatever, like some shit like that. I'm classically trained and there's no music theory in hip hop. It's right. Go snack on some peanuts. Like, let's say that, cool, the premise is Black people are culturally don't instill the values of other groups. But even, like, I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying, like, hypothetically, right?
Okay.
Black people aren't immigrants. So why are we comparing Black people who have built this country to people who just got here, relatively speaking, who are exploiting or adding to the culture that those fundamental Black Americans built. My issue with Black America isn't that. The question isn't why is the disparity here. The question is, how have they been here for so long? And I say they because my parents are Caribbean immigrants. How have they been here for so long, yet they're still where they are? And that's where I go,
Two things. I don't think they are where they are. That's number one. Not to the level the leftists want to say. When I saw a couple of videos and a couple of blacks and whites saying this, when there was looting happening, they said, well, that's they have no other options. They have never, they can't buy that stuff that these white people are flaunting. So it's time for us to shut the fuck up with that. Number one, I've been broke as shit for a long fucking time. Okay, maybe it's because I'm half Puerto Rican. Nah, it's because I made bad decisions. Okay. Number two.
So you're not going to say fuck it, bust a window?
Yeah. Number two. A lot of the looters didn't look homeless, did they? Okay. Now I'm not saying they could afford chic and all the shit at Target that they wanted. Okay. But I am saying that they have different priorities, and they don't have culturally someone to emulate or show or tell them, yeah, sorry, you do have to work at McDonald's for 6 months to a year and then become a manager, work your way up. Here's how to sales. Oh, while you're doing that, take this free course, take if it's available. I'm not saying that those are the only resources or that there definitely are, but are they exercising everything they can to get out of that place? It comes from the people you're around. Okay, it comes from the people you are around who are emulating it and showing it to you. And yet the people who were looting and stuff were not broke as fuck. They were wearing it's the same motherfuckers who were outside the chic store for a couple hours. You know what I mean? Like that. Let's be fucking real.
Yeah, no, I like where this is going. I think we're building a great grab bag. If I might slightly pivot for a moment, and then we'll kind of return to this context. Are you familiar with the Bundy standoff against the Bureau of Land Management in 2016?
No, I feel like I've heard about it.
You certainly have.
Let's go, by the way, so it's 9:23. Let's go like 15 more minutes, because this has been a fucking great conversation. But sure. While you're talking about that, I'm going to grab some water, but I am listening, I swear. And if it's too loud, let me know.
All right, sure, yeah. In the meantime, I'll rehydrate myself real quick. All right. So...
This is a fucking great conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time and your presence.
Absolutely, you too.
Thank you. So BLM, the original BLM, was... So the Bureau of Land Management, I don't know too much about... I'll give you 30,000 feet. I'm going to be deliberately vague and just, take me at my word. So a lot of the Western states didn't get developed until the early 20th century because super far away, it took a long time to get all the trains and infrastructure out there. So in the meantime, what you had were two really big coalitions controlling the land and in turn controlling the politics of those places. You had large...
You said industries? Or you said companies?
Interests. I think I said.
Okay.
Maybe. I don't think that's what I said, but let's roll with it.
Okay.
So you had large land management conglomerations and the federal government. There wasn't quite a state government apparatus in the way that there was on the East Coast. So these two groups, big ranchers and big government, have been fighting it out ever since 1914 in the Western states. Now, 102 years after the proverbial opening salvo gets fired, with the annexation of whatever state you want to put in there, we have my boys, not Ted Bundy, something Bundy, and he's got some guys, right? Maybe about fewer than a dozen people who were illegally ranching, or rather feeding their cattle outside of their allotment, because part of the uneasy compromise between these feuding ranchers and big government was the big federal government went, okay. We're going to let the Pepsi-Cola Beef Corporation feed your cattle from August to June, and then you're off the land. And here are the square footages that you can feed off of. But the Bundy boys had their own cattle, and they kept gradually straying outside of the time allotments and the spatial allotments.
What year was this?
2016, I think.
Only a few years ago. Okay.
So they picked up guns, and they were like, I think my cow's eating here. Do you have a problem? And they had a standoff that lasted, I want to say, maybe 3 months, and ended as the men rammed through a barricade, and one of the guys essentially committed suicide by cop. I'm very reluctant to ever side with a police officer in an officer-involved shooting, but from what I saw in the helicopter video, it very much looked like an old white libertarian dude trying to Red Dawn some shit, you know. But the point being, people on the left, for years, derided these guys, saying, oh, it's so fucked up that these white racists are occupying land under our beloved leader Barack Hussein, and there's never any good reason to occupy an area with weapons and take over space. Meanwhile, they're cheering on Chaz. What I'm saying is, if you support Chaz, then you really need to start reading back on the right wing doing that, because conservatives are the people who've done that.
Yeah, fighting the government. Yeah. I
and
also
like
think
occupying space.
I also think if you do intellectually support Chaz, you just need to get laid and do some therapy. I don't care if you're an atheist, meditate some. Anyway, but well, yeah, no, I
mean, so I remembered where I was trying to loop that in. So I go back to the point you made about the looting, and I would kind of say, like, I made that. I made the comment on the Bundy Ranch to say, outside of politics, I'm personally okay with political violence. Now, looting isn't hurting people. Occupying land isn't hurting people. So why are we condemning the people taking shit instead of saying, you know what, let's just make sure these people don't have the opportunity to, and the way to do that is to not have a massive protest movement. How do you get rid of the massive protest movement that's giving cover to looters? Make some pretty good police reforms.
Okay.
It's just like Malcolm X. Just like Malcolm X. Deal with me so you don't deal, or rather Martin Luther King. Deal with me so you don't have to deal with the alternative. And the looters are positioning themselves as the alternative. And I think the looters are, frankly, the least violent version of that alternative that we're possibly going to get. So I don't understand why we're like...
So a couple of things. 17 people, as far as my last count, have died as a result of the riots and looting. Okay. So one of them, a lot of them were people of color. So I don't think that it's just looting. The other thing is if we're really wanting to talk about if the conversation really is taking advantage of people of color, here's how that goes. Mostly black and now white peaceful protesters come in. White cunts come in who have daddy issues, and they start rioting and hurting the cops. And then they come in after the peaceful protesters, and then the black people come in and loot it. Now, who's getting really the most? I mean, it's under the umbrella culturally of Black Lives Matter. So Black Lives Matter are black people, again, because of just simple branding. It's easy for humans to do that. Black people are getting a bad rap, and they're getting taken advantage of because they know these teens have already been told, you should take as much as you can because it's a dog eat dog world, even though it fucking isn't. Deep. Yep, I fucking said it. When I come to my fucking, okay, I'm not saying that I haven't been taken advantage of or haven't paid dumb taxes way higher than I should or have had a walk in the park. I certainly fucking haven't. But somewhere along the line, if I want my life to change, I cannot be a fucking victim. I cannot, because if you are a victim internally, you will never change. You know what I mean? I need to look inside myself and go, what? It doesn't matter what my parents did. It doesn't matter what shit I grew up in. It doesn't matter. I need to change. And everybody I know knows that in their belly, okay? Because I know a lot of spiritual motherfuckers who would say that and then think it doesn't apply because the motherfucker grew up black. Fuck that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Spirituality is spirit.
I was going to say, unfortunately, I don't know if enough of Black America has that knowledge that, like,
cultural.
The victim claim, and I agree where it's cultural, but that's again where I go. That is a different cross to bear from the fact that we're looking at the descendants of our founding fathers and mothers who have still acquired a fraction of the wealth as recent immigrants. I want immigrants to thrive, but I'm sorry. It's kind of weird to me if you have Nigerian Americans seeming to do pretty well, Caribbean Americans doing well, Polish Americans doing well.
Almost every type of Asian.
Yet the great-great-great-grandson of Thomas Jefferson's bedwench can't get a job. Even if he himself is a fuck-up. I'm like, dude, I know so many former drug users in Connecticut who are working for a hedge fund. As they should.
Right.
Chucky cleaned up his habit. He's able to put on a Windsor knot, and he wants to check in for 9 to 5. Boom. Then you deserve everything that's coming to you. But why is it that Tyrone has to jump through more hoops than a dolphin, and yet still crumbs?
I don't know if I necessarily agree that Tyrone has to jump through more hoops. I think when you tell other people, number one, that they're victims, when you tell people as they're growing up that they're victims, and number two, if you tell them they're going to have to jump through more hoops, then they will think that they do. So that when they get treated, I mean, I can't tell you how many shitty, there's been many times where I've been one of the dummies working at a minimum wage job, okay, 17, 18, 19, 20, and to be right next to a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old black guy who thinks it's unfair that he gets treated exactly like I do, and walks off the fucking job. Because, well, fuck you, and steals something maybe. Because fuck you, because he's been shown that, well, you know what, I'm very prideful, and stay prideful, and no one's going to treat me like a second-class citizen. Guess what? You cannot be treated like you work at IBM if you are paying your fucking dues. Everybody has to pay dues internally. I'm not talking on the grand scheme of culture. I'm saying internally, right? So why are they being told that? And you can see it in fucking hip hop too. Motherfuckers coming up because they haven't been paying dues at all. Their job is just to get a quick SoundCloud hit and then soak up as much of the fucking bullshit that they haven't earned. They haven't created anything real. They haven't paid fucking dues. Okay, I'm not saying it doesn't happen in other places. I'm talking black culture specifically. If you get shown that people are going to treat you different, if you get shown that people are going to be unfair, then you are going to look out for it.
There is a book called the DSM. I believe we're up to, the last time I checked was the 4th edition. Yeah, I think we're up to the 5th then, probably, because it's been a while. The Diagnostic Statistical Manual, right? It lists symptoms for various mental imbalances and prescriptions therein. I think Black in America is a form of trauma, anxiety, and depression that people aren't getting the right pills for. And if you go up to a child who has trauma, depression, or anxiety, they're going to be pretty awkward. Go up to a kid with ADD on a great day and try to make eye contact with them, and you're going to be like, "Well, it's just kind of, you there? Like, you there,
right.
buddy?"
Right.
So the ways that Black people are allowed to go into a corner and spaz out, and the systems that trigger them into conflict are so aligned. I was really taken by a thing you said on the Nico episode recently, where he talked about like how a lot of Black dudes just have like really shitty run-ins with the cops. And I went, absolutely, that's it. That's what trauma looks like. That's what disassociation looks like. When for whatever reason you're so convinced, and this is where I think it's cultural, but you're so convinced that you're a victim. And then you add to that the fact that he's on the job and you're not. And that's a powder keg.
Sure. And the way to fix it Man, we really shouldn't open this door. God damn it. Because I really should. Not that I'm not enjoying this conversation, but I feel like we could do a whole episode again. I just think part of the way to fix it is, and again, let me fucking repeat myself, everybody. I'm saying part of the way to fix it is for Black culture to stop. So, like you said, trauma, right? Let's I'm here to posit the idea that sometimes Black people are traumatized, but they're not correct. Okay. As an example, when Nico and I were talking about it, how 9 unarmed Black people died last year at the, let's call it murder. Let's call it nine people, and 5 of those motherfuckers attacked the cop first. Let's make believe that they all 9 of them attacked or none of them attacked the cop first. You're talking 9 people out of 41 million, out of millions and millions and millions of interaction with police every day. Okay, and that's all of 2019. That's 9 people, unarmed Black people. Okay, and 19 unarmed white people, 41 people unarmed total. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm saying our diagnosis is not correct, and that's why I disagree with the medicine. The medicine being proposed, i.e., let's defund the police, i.e., let's only buy from Black businesses, i.e., Instagram and Facebook just jerking every Black like, oh, I'm so sorry for being white. Let's take care of, let's get rid of Uncle Ben. Let's get rid of, let's just panic as companies. We're looking at companies panicking. Companies are looking at us panicking, and everyone's just getting in a tizzy and getting traumatized for no fucking reason. But I'm not saying that the 9 unarmed Black people should have died. They should the fuck have not. And you know what? Cops could do a lot fucking better job training, a lot fucking better job accountability, a lot fucking better job. None of this immunity shit. But fucking goddamn it, if it's 9, why are we literally 17 people have died from riots and looters in the last 3 weeks, and we're talking 9 in the entire country. One in the one hand. Let's stop the bleeding where the fuck it is. Stop the bleeding where the fuck it is, and let's not make 9 turn into I'm gonna wear a shirt. Bullshit. Do you know how many people die a day? Do you know how many people are murdered a day? No shirt, no hashtag. Be fucking real. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that to you, of course. I'm saying that to the grand scheme of us.
I very much hold that sentiment. Where I diverge, I think, is that I believe that, like I said earlier, this country is a centuries-long conspiracy. And I think that we're seeing people who haven't had sex in 3 months trying to develop a language for political and class consciousness that has not existed. There was no racial or class consciousness under Obama. The Obama administration was very bad for these conversations. And people are learning in real time how to have them. So while I do think hashtag Black Lives Matter is pretty cringe, I do think a lot of the discussion around defunding the police is pretty cringe. I think that, and maybe this is a broader conversation for another day, I think that there's a very compelling case that you could make that people aren't mad about the 19. They're on some Boston Tea Party 1776 shit. I'm not here to talk about racial justice. Sorry, the 9, I apologize.
It's okay.
I'm not here to talk about racial justice, immigrant justice. There are those people out there, and that's important work. But the more I research the specific case of Black Americans, I see a group of people who have built capital in this country for centuries and see none of the returns. So again, when the great-great-great-great-great-grandchild of an enslaved person busts a window down, I go, I'm not snitching because I have no better answer for you. My family just got here, and I'm doing better than you are. And I don't think that's right.
I don't think that's right. I agree. But the phrase, I don't think that's right, is not a blank check. And it's not a diagnosis on why you're in that situation, right? That's the same thing as somebody going into a fucking cancer ward and oh doc, I've got cancer. Here's a wig. No, motherfucker, like you know what I mean? Like yeah, maybe that's a horrible analogy actually.
Yeah, I didn't quite follow. But
God damn it! All I'm saying is, yes, it's a tragedy, but to say it's a tragedy doesn't mean, because there's a million people, like you said, cringe, who are saying it must be racism, and I do not hold with that idea. Because Asians also had, Chinese specifically.
I think we're defining racism differently.
Maybe, but let me expound on this idea real quick.
Please.
The reason why Asians are killing it right now, because they have been for a long time, they have been here as well. Okay, they were building the fucking railroads in 1850s in San Francisco. They've been here maybe not as long, okay, but they have been here a long time. The reason that they've been kicking ass is not because big white daddy America says good Asian. No, here's why. It's because they said keep talking shit. Keep talking shit. I'm gonna quietly. I mean, I've lived and worked around a lot of Chinese motherfuckers, and they may lack on humor, but or my version of humor, but they do not lack on work ethic. Them motherfuckers.
Real estate acumen.
Okay, they fucking murder in Chinatown right now. I mean, maybe not right now, but in Chinatown in 2013, I want to say 2012. California or San Francisco, the entire city of San Francisco got rid of plastic bags. No more plastic bags. And yet in Chinatown, a 10-block radius or so, they had plastic bags the entire fucking time. You know why? Because they said during years and years early, because they do whatever the fuck they want. Okay? Chinese people in as far as mainland or first generation, they weren't worried about who was making fucking jokes about them. They weren't worried about who was keeping them down. They said, watch what the fuck happens. Keep talking shit. And they pulled out their big fucking Chinese dicks and they flexed fucking muscle. Okay. Right. They put their head down. They worked like a son of a bitch. And then their second generation was able to build on that and build on that and build on that. And now they have the political power to say, look at my bag, cop. What the fuck you gonna do? Okay, look, they have political power because they earned that shit. I'm not saying black people haven't done it, because a lot of black people fucking have. But I'm saying to lump in to say it must be racism, I think is incorrect. It's a tragedy, absolutely. But to say that it's race, just I think is incorrect. I think it's because black people are still angry and they won't let go. Okay, and I'm not saying that it wasn't a tragedy. But it's not a tragedy that you lived through. It's not a tragedy that anybody living right now has lived through. Okay, maybe fucking Jim Crow laws and lynching and all that stuff. Absolutely. Okay, but Larry Elder has a perfect point. Okay, and you already know I say the N-word from time to time, so I'm going to use it now. Larry Elder says this when he was in college. Okay. He's with a very liberal teacher, and she's telling this story, this poem about this guy who goes to Virginia on summer vacation, and how he's just a little boy, and he sees this white little other same age boy coming down the street, and he smiles at the white boy, and the white boy pokes out his tongue and calls him nigger. And he said, from May until I was in Virginia from May until September, and yet for my entire vacation, that's all that I remember. And everybody in the class is sad. And everybody, I mean, this teacher is telling Larry Elder, this black man, oh, this guy who wrote this poem is going to be marginalized for the rest of his life, and he's going to remember that day, and he's going to. And Larry Elder goes to his mom, and his mom is cooking in the kitchen. He says, "Mom, let me tell you this poem." He tells her the poem, and he's like, "Isn't that awful?" And his mother turns to him and says, what a fucking shame that he let something so small spoil his vacation.
Yep.
Where along the line? I'm not saying let's not address douchebag ass.
I gave you an answer. Redlining. And I appreciate what you said about Larry Elder. I'll give you these quick stats.
Redlining. What do you mean redlining?
Before I say this, I will just say I'd really like to reflect more on what you've said. And a lot of what you said I'm not going to speak to because I want to let it sink in. You've made some really compelling points I haven't considered. But redlining, I'll give you a couple of things. So redlining, What after the Great
Oh,
Depression?
let me just pause you real quick. I wasn't posing that question necessarily to you. It was halfway, but more it was, this is why I disagree. It was a rhetorical question to this is why I disagree. Not wholeheartedly with helping Black people up, but with the grand scheme of this is the reason why Black people or Black Americans haven't been as successful as immigrants is because of racism. Continue.
Well, I really, to that point, I loved what you said about tragedy versus racism. I don't see the Black struggle in those terms, but I think those are two very interesting polarities to hold up against each other that I want to think more about.
Okay.
But redlining was the practice that started after the Great Depression, where the federal government tried to increase home ownership because it was a stable commodity that could restructure the dollar. So, in order to standardize home prices and mortgages, there was a federal administration set up of assessors, tax assessors, to make A, B, C, and D grade plots. And without fail, color of people's skin was the biggest influence on the rating. So in other words, you could have a 20% Black neighborhood entirely of tutor houses and lawyers get a C rating, but you would have an all-white neighborhood of, oh shit, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
an all-white an all-white neighborhood of like less prestigious homes getting a B. And I look at that. I look at the rapid surge of reinvestment in the financial sector that happened when Trump was a developer in the 70s, the 80s. Part of why I make country is because I think the city is the new stockade. Black people are kept in cities the way cattle were kept in corrals out west. And the way that's tied to home ownership was so arbitrary and malicious and recent enough to go, yeah, slavery, I don't think slavery affected that much. Jim Crow, I don't think Jim Crow affected that much. In 1930, Black Americans owned more than a fifth of national farmland. In 1969, after all these civil rights, we owned less than 1%. So what does being able to vote? What does being able to have sex with your white wife? What does being able to eat a burger next to some Irishman have to do with you actually getting ahead in the country? It doesn't. That's where the Asians are great, because they were never about these cosmetic issues. They were about systemic shit. Point being, I think it's redlining, where we start to see home ownership, because 80% of U.S. standing houses right now were built after 1940. 80%. And that was definitely but we also had Black people not allowed to live in suburbs.
Hang on, you cut out a little bit there. You said, and that was definitely what?
Malicious. It was definitely malicious and recent.
Okay. And that was countrywide?
Yes.
And that was, was it on paper?
Yes.
It was on paper. Don't give Black people a certain.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And right. I hear that. Not some quill parchment Jeffersonian shit. I'm talking like IBM, fucking slick as hell, 1975, the cleanest new model,
Okay. So you're saying, well, no. What you're saying is what happened after the Great Depression, but you're also saying that in the 70s and 80s with developers like Trump, that would also happen. And I'm sure it would probably happen in Kentucky in 1990 or whatever. Now,
it happened in New Orleans in 2006.
Really?
There were.
Where it was on paper? Or were they poor coming to the office and they happened to be Black? Like, were they? Do you understand what I'm saying? How there's, I've had a couple conversations with Mark Hughes, actually, as an example, who's a comic who thinks a lot of that more has to do with class versus race.
I'd like to use your prior example of the symptoms to racism versus the diagnosis to racism. And me, when I'm diagnosing what is racism, I look for two symptoms. And unless both of these conditions are met, I don't call it racism. I just keep it moving. Vigilante justice and clear government malfeasance. And
Okay.
there are a few unique times where you can see, coincidentally, at the same time that this developer got a racially advantageous deal, you have said developer writing a front page editorial about getting 6 black kids the death penalty. You know,
I know what you're referencing. I still think that could have easily been more about the culture war of I want to be tough on crime. It could have easily been much more don't let people who are. It could have easily been culturally bringing up the people who are, because he wasn't a politician at the time. Bringing up people who are into justice and are into paying their way and are into whatever, that he didn't think they were. It's very possible he just did not think they were innocent.
it is. I mean, yeah. At the end of the day, I wouldn't, say he should be charged with anything for that. Like, again, I feel like racism has nothing to do with my life, or rather, personal racism. So I'm not here to diagnose or disavow or forgive people for their personal biases. But I do think that in the case of Trump as a microcosm and white supremacy as a macrocosm, I see all feasible, plausible deniability snuffed out. So I'm not here to say they're guilty by here's all my evidence. All I can say is, you trust me as a compassionate, kind person. I like to think I'm a fairly polite, compassionate person. I can think about the ways I move through the world. I can think about people who have said, rural white people from my time at college, who've said very racist things to me, who I still trust and love and think are better people than my wokest SJW Facebook friends.
Wow. Okay. I think a piece of that, and maybe we'll close, but I think a piece of that is, have you read Colin Quinn's The Coloring Book?
No, I know Colin Quinn. That's dope.
Oh, you gotta read the Coloring Book. It's my favorite. Oh, it's so good. It says it's called The Coloring Book. A comedian solves race relations in America. It came out in maybe 2015, and he talks about how back in the 70s growing up, and in the 80s. No, yeah, he grew up in the 70s in Brooklyn, Park Slope. And then he said back then it was Park Slope. It was like, you could go down one block and it was horrendous, and then go down the next and it looks like Park Slope now. And he said that, you would have black guys, that this is complicated, that humans are complicated, that you could, just like a lot of black guys distrust the man and distrust white people and hate white people as a concept, white people as a system, they have white friends, right? And how that doesn't make them, that even if you were white in the 70s and you would call a black guy an N-word out of anger, you would still have black friends. How it was more about the interpersonal desire to make someone feel bad than it was about you're black and you're inferior. It was about,
Yes.
You understand? That's a big fucking difference, right?
Yes.
So that racism doesn't necessarily, you know what I mean?
Yes,
Anyway.
yes. And I guess in closing, here's the plug ultimately for his pioneers. The self-alienation that places like Park Slope and the white liberal gentry encourage does lead to more racial strife. Like you're saying, it's neither here nor there whether you say the N-word. It's about, can you vibe? But if you can't vibe with yourself, how are you going to reach across the aisle racially? And I think that, for lack of a better thought out allegory, I don't know if you've been to Williamsburg, Brooklyn lately, but there are a lot of these very just brutalist structures, these little pod apartments all across Brooklyn, you know? And I feel like that segment, in those pod apartments, you have small walls and big windows, especially when you get to the newer built developments. There's a very small square footage in a lot of those, but very big windows constantly. And I think that is analogous to the way race ends up playing out, in the sense that you have white liberals, you have these overly racialized people who are stacking themselves in glass houses with thin walls. And sometimes that means you see things. Other times it means we hear you when we don't want to. And so I don't think it's an either or. I think there is a cultural racial problem. And the left isn't helping. But the one thing the left does get right, that the right always forgets, is it's the government too. And we can chew and walk gum at this. We can chew and walk gum at the same time. I'm going to stick with that.
I like that. Okay, God, we got to stop talking, because I just did one quick thing. At the same time, I think one of the big tenets of conservatism as a whole is small government, is distrust of big government. So I think that they're actually were more a part of the same cloth than a lot of the liberals and the leftists would. I think I would actually give credit to the right there.
I would too. I would also say, though, that changed in the 80s from my research.
Okay. Yeah, we have a lot more to fucking discuss. You are a smart motherfucker. I like conversations like this. Yeah, this is awesome. This is great. So where can people find your stuff?
For now, the two best places are hispioneers.bandcamp.com, as well as our Instagram page, his.pioneers. And there'll be more to come on those two fronts.
Awesome. Yeah, you have some videos out on YouTube and stuff. I really appreciated them.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I do. YouTube channel, His Pioneers. Thank you.
But is the newest one like 8 months ago, a year ago?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Recently? Okay.
There's some stuff coming up, though, in a couple weeks.
Badass. Yeah, everybody go follow him on Instagram and on YouTube. I'll put a link down in the YouTube thing. Make sure, everybody, wherever you're listening right now, I want you to pause, and I want you to subscribe. I want you to see the little button that says subscribe, and I want you to hit it with your hand or with your penis or with your vulva, whatever you need to. Hit the little bell. Make sure you rate it, review, share it with your less offendable friends. Share it with people who like intellectual conversations and dick jokes. And again, if you are white and you don't share or leave a comment, you're racist, because I'm half Puerto Rican. So, and make sure wherever you're, or you can, find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano. You can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/conservatish. You can Venmo me if you want, or email your stuff to conservatishpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate you coming on the show. This was a fucking great conversation. Yeah, I hope to have you back on.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to listening to whomever you've got on next. It's a great show.
Right on. Thanks, dude. All right, everybody. Have a good night. Thanks again, Josh. Or actually, you know what? Why don't I stop the recording, and then we can just